Welcome to today's session, the info session on the A²E² Awards. I'm Sarah. Today I'll be facilitating along with Enda, and we're both on the A²E² Executive Committee at the moment and facilitating the awards process. And we also have Keith Willey joining us, who is a previous award winner. So I'd like to start by acknowledging, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're all joining from today, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Today I'm in Brisbane and on the land of the Turrbal and the Yugara people. So in terms of what we're going to move through today, we're going to start with a bit of an overview of the awards scheme. Then we're going to move into some strategies for writing a strong application. So I'm going to share some general tips, and then Keith is going to share some advice from his previous successful applications. And then at the end, we will take any questions, and we won't record that part of the session. So I think I'm passing over to Enda at this point, who is going to do the overview component. I'll share if you want to share your bit.
Yep, should be going. Okay, so overview of the awards. So kia ora koutou, ko Enda Crossan, toku ingoa, so I'm Enda Crossan from the University of Canterbury. So we've got 4 awards. I should just mention, and I'll talk about this as we go through the different awards, that 3 of the awards you need to apply through Engineers Australia, and the citation for the Early Career Award, you need to go through A²E²'s website. So the 4 awards are the Australian Council of Engineering Deans Award for Engineering Education Excellence, the A²E² Award, the Engineers Australia Award for Engineering Education Engagement, Award for Engineering Education Research Design, and then the A²E² Award for Outstanding Early Career Contributions to Engineering Education. So yeah, for the first 3 awards, we'd really strongly encourage you to get your head around the guidelines and the requirements for these awards via the website on Engineers Australia. So please check your eligibility requirements for each of these awards. So the first awards, again, the Australian Council of Engineering Deans National Award for Engineering Education Excellence. You can, with this award, nominate as an individual or as a small team. And what this is about really is sustained contributions to the Australasian engineering education community. So it doesn't necessarily have to focus on teaching or research. It is a sustained commitment to the whole society. So the judging criteria are there. The focus on relevance, context and contribution, evidence of impact through monitoring and evaluation, and then clarity and readability. $5,000 is on offer, plus a framed certificate. The second one is the Award for Engineering Education Engagement. So this one is very much focused on learning and teaching excellence. Like the previous award, you can apply either as an individual or as a team, and the similar criteria there again. The focus and relevance, evidence of impact, and clarity. $2,500 plus a framed certificate. The third one is the Engineering Education Award for Research Design in the field of engineering education. Again, like the other awards, you can go as an individual or as a team. And the focus for the criteria are on its the relevance for the engineering education research, the contribution and the context of that research, validity and credibility. So we are looking for some of the outcomes, as well as the research design, and the transferability of the research outcomes. Finally, looking at, like the other awards, clarity and readability, and a similar cash prize there of $2,500 plus a framed certificate. Okay, so for those awards, you need to have prepared a profile image and a short biography, and we're encouraging you, if you are submitting as a team, is to have a short biography ready for your the other team members as well. You need to prepare a short abstract, 150 words, for that nomination, and then if it's a team nomination, the percentage contribution for each of the team members and what each team member did. In terms of the actual full submission, it is quite strict. It's a 5-page limit with minimum 12-point font. And look, we'll talk to you in a minute about just some general tips on what that can look like. Finally, there's the outstanding early career contribution for an engineering education academic. So this is an individual award. It is submitted through the A2E website. And so the strict criteria here is that you need to be an early career academic. What that means is that you either have had to have gained your PhD or equivalent in the last 5 years, or if you've made a shift to engineering education in the last 5 years, that meets the requirement. And we do also account for career breaks and so on, with January 1 as the benchmark for calculating that. With this particular award, there are a number of citation criteria, which I'll show on the next slide. You need to nominate which one of those criteria you're actually applying for. And similarly, quite similar to those other awards, we're looking for focus and relevance, the context of your early career contribution, the evidence of impact, and then clarity and readability, and $1,000. So there's up to 3 awards in 2022. What I would mention, though, with the other awards too, is that we don't necessarily have to grant an award for a particular year. We'd love to, but we don't have to. Okay, so the 5 criteria for the Early Career Award. So the first one is on teaching and support. Second one is on developing engineering curricula. First one is focused around evaluation practices, so scholarship of learning and teaching. Fourth one, innovation and leadership, and enhanced engineering learning and education. And then the final one, is effectively improving teaching through engagement with research, and that can include obviously leaning on the existing research. So this one is a 3-page limit, so 12-point font. And as I mentioned before, you need to really clearly state which citation criteria that you're applying for, and then provide a short overview of the background and what the main contribution is, and then some statements to support the evidence. And then finally, a reference list. And we don't have a strict requirement on the reference style. If you are more familiar with APA or IEEE, but bear in mind that also needs to be within the 3-page limit. So the process is that the applications close on September 1st this year, and then that the submissions will then be judged by a panel of experts. If any of those experts raise any conflicts of interest, we have a few backup judges ready in case that happens. And as I mentioned, we don't always award in all of the categories. The winners will be announced at the A2E2 conference at the University of Western Sydney in December. And as I mentioned, just need to be aware that for those first 3 awards, you need to go through the EA portal, whereas the Early Career Award needs to go through the A2E2 website. Okay, advice for writing a strong application. I'm handing it back to you, Sarah.
Yep, I think that was the plan.
Yep, cool.
Yeah. All right, I'll just reshare. So a couple of high-level tips on sort of strategies to think about when you start to embark upon developing an application. So the first one is really around understanding the requirements. So, Enda's just talked through a variety of different awards. It's really important that you select the one that is most appropriate to the work that you're trying to highlight and get recognised for. Second to that is making sure that you're actually addressing the assessment criteria when you write that application. So we tell students a lot, make sure you're addressing whatever's in that criteria sheet. We've seen in the last couple of awards judging, there has been applications submitted that don't really speak to any of the criteria. And of course, that's what the judges are scoring against. So it's really, really important that you, focus on making sure that you've addressed each of those criteria when you write that application. The next one is around developing a structure. So we've seen some people in the past have sort of made the mistake around giving a big long list of all the things that they've done in engineering education, which is not quite what we're looking for. You probably want to try and find an overarching theme or a focus of your application that you're going to sort of highlight and be recognised for. So yeah, you're not going to try and write to everything that you've ever done. Really try and pick a focus. So examples of what it might be, when I did my application, I looked at how I had created video resources for a number of different units. It could be how you've incorporated work integrated learning across a degree, things like that. Trying to pick, that specific focus. The other thing to think about is developing a narrative structure for your application. So again, rather than just listing out all the things you've done, it can be nice to have a bit of a story that weaves through on what you've done. And I find that people who sort of frame it around what was the problem and how did you go about fixing it is one of the most effective ways in sort of trying to communicate that story. It's like, what next, what problem did you come up against? How did you solve that and move through it? The next one is around integrating evidence for demonstrating your impact and significance of your contribution. And you would have noticed that every single one of the criteria, every single one of the awards had a criteria around this. So you want to be thinking about a range of sources that you can look to and support those impact claims that you're making. So it's not just about looking at the institutional student survey and saying, I got some good ratings, here's some quotes. You want to be thinking more broad than that. So I'll just jump to the next slide because I've got a few different examples of the types of things that you might want to think about. So there's category there around self. So this is around benchmarking yourself against people. You can also look to the literature and evidence how what you've done is supported by what's in that research base. You can get quotes from other people like your peers to be able to say that yes, what you've done had a great impact. If other people have adopted what you've done as well, that's great as a source of evidence to demonstrate that broader impact on students. Student perceptions is still important, so institutional survey results can go in your application, but again, think a bit more broadly about how else you might want to pick up that sort of data. If you have evidence of students' learning outcomes, such as improvements in an assessment result or better employment opportunities, once you've introduced a certain intervention, that's something to look to. If you've already been recognised by other awards, that's something that you can pop in your application as well. And finally, if you've got some external people who are talking to, you know, the quality of the work that you've done, the influence that you've had at that sort of higher, more strategic level, that's also great to include in your application. So there's just a few ideas on the types of things to look to. Just jumping back, make sure that you weave that evidence of impact throughout your application. Don't just pack it all in at the end. You want to build that story all the way through. And anytime that you include some data in your application, such as a figure or a table, make sure that you actually discuss that in your application. I think this is something that we tell students about as well a lot. Don't just pop in a graph and expect people to know what it means. Make sure that you actually explain it and tease out, you know, why that's important to your story. And the fourth one is around incorporating appropriate language. So you want to be writing not in a highly academic way. You want to have it as an accessible piece of work where people can sort of pick it up and understand what you've done. And a good strategy as well is when you're developing your application is to draw on the language included in those assessment criteria, because that's going to signpost to the judges where you're demonstrating those various different aspects. So if you can sort of parrot back a little bit of that language, it really helps in them being able to identify, oh yes, they did demonstrate this particular thing. And the last tip I've got there is around seeking out and incorporating feedback. So writing these award applications can be a bit of a new experience, especially for engineers. It's quite a different form of writing compared to like the normal reports and the research that we might be producing. So what I would recommend is definitely getting feedback from your colleagues on what they think of your writing, whether you're sort of communicating that story, and if you're incorporating enough of that evidence of impact throughout your application. So I think that's all I've got in terms of those tips. A couple of other things to point to. So there are some applications for past award winners available on the A² E² website. I'll just quickly share with you now that. So on the website under activities and awards, if you go to this past winners page, give it a moment to load. In fact, I might have had it open. Oh, here we go. So there are a couple of applications from last year's winner. So Tim McCarthy, and I think down the bottom there is a couple from the citation winners from last year. So I would recommend having a look at that so that you get a bit familiar with the style and the type of work that's sort of expected to win these awards. The other thing that I had there was linking to, teaching. So this is a parallel sort of award scheme, but they do have quite a bit of good information to support their applicants in developing applications, a lot of which is applicable to our context. So if you're interested in looking a bit more into that, under this how to nominate section, there's a whole bunch of sort of information in here to help people in developing awards. Here we go, resources for nominees. So that can be something to have a look at. Probably the most useful stuff is around that building evidence and what you can look to demonstrate that impact. So I'll just jump back. Cool, yes. So that's all from me. So the next little bit is going to be a bit from Keith Willie, who is a previous award winner. So I looked back on the website earlier today, and I think Keith has won the Engineering Excellence Award twice, in 2020 and in 2010, and has won the Research Design Award 3 times over the past several years. So definitely well decorated. So I'm going to pass across to Keith now, and he is going to talk through some of the strategies that he has used in developing those applications as well.